Good to be here. Thanks very much. So look, thank you very much. And look, my apologies. I would like to have been there in person. But to tell you the truth, this is a great opportunity to not just talk about social media and CRM, but to show you exploit it. And I think that's one of the keys as we start to have a look at the impact and the potential application of these technologies. One of the things we're all going to have to do, no matter how long we've been around, is to look at how do we use these technologies and perhaps open our eyes up and change the paradigm that we've traditionally used to deliver our message. So as I take the next 15 minutes to talk about social media and CRM, I need to make some admissions right up front. And one of those is that I'm not going to give you your Facebook strategy. I'm not going to give you your Twitter strategy. In fact, I'm not going to give you a specific answer to how to exploit these technologies. But rather, I'd like to look at the impact on CRM and give you some perhaps different ways of viewing these and thinking about how they complement your existing messages, your existing sales and marketing, and even service processes going forward. But look, just a starting point before we get too carried away, there's some things that haven't changed. And as much as we get carried away and enthusiastic about social media, you know, there's some foundation stones that just, hey, let's just stay back around these, because the reality is the buying journey itself. So put yourself, the last time you bought something, either directly as a consumer or on behalf of your company, the buying journey really hasn't changed. I mean, buyers still have only a limited number of resources and they have pain points, and they go through a process of deciding how to solve those pain points and choose suppliers and contract directly or put in place the right arrangements and then take customer service. So the buying journey per se really hasn't changed. And in spite of what the media is saying, not everything is being sourced at commodity prices. You know, there's still an opportunity for people to sell things where a value proposition is appreciated by the buyers. And that, you know, the buyers themselves, they still apply decision criteria to it. But here's the rub. Technology is not standing still. Technology is not going to give you an opportunity to draw breath and say, you know what, for the next 2 years, it is what it is. It's stopped. And therefore, I can just take my time and make a considered decision around how it is I take my message to market. And it's technology that, unfortunately, is breaking things around your traditional view of going to market. So there's some foundations that I'm talking about there. But if you like, this social media marketing and marketing in general, you know, up here, and I hope even at the back of the room that you can see this chart, but what we're talking about is over the last, I don't know, 8-9 years, we've seen a decrease in the number of people interested purely in marketing. And all this chart is really telling us is, of all the Google searches that were made, what proportion of them had marketing in them? And you'll see that over time, that's come down. Now, let's just have a look at this in the context of social media marketing. And you'll see here that New Zealand's clearly ahead of your Australian brethren in terms of asking the question around social media. But you'll see in general that there's a trend upwards associated with this. And I suppose what we're really indicating with this is that you can't just sit on your hands and go, we'll wait for somebody else. This is not real. The reality is social media is real. Social media is forming a key part of people's go-to-market strategy, their marketing communication mix, and you can either choose to ignore it and be left behind, and in which case you better hope that your markets appreciate not using those technologies, or you can say, you know what, I'm going to have a go here. And in fact, when you start to have a look at these sorts of things, let's just come back to the fundamental challenge in front of us. As a marketing and a sales team, we've got to get our messages out there. And in fact, if you have a look here, I've got business to consumer, I've got business to business, and I've got the key opinion leader, which seems to be an acronym that I'm hearing more and more. Can I just ask in the audience, how many of you are in the B2C space? How many operate in the B2C space? Not so many in the B2B space? Okay, so a few more in the B2B space. So we might focus our examples more in that. When you look at it, we're very comfortable with some of these traditional broadcast abilities to take our message out there. And if I was to ask you about integrating those into your marketing communication mix, integrating those into the way you take your message and position a value proposition in the market, you go, tick, 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 we've been doing that, that's not an issue. But what we have seen is this whole proliferation and alternates of other broadcast mediums that are now in our kit bag. And I suppose confronting us, and I have to say it's the most common question I get as I walk around talking with sales executives, with marketing executives, and you know what? Also with the CFOs and the MDs and CEOs is, what are we going to do with this new media? In fact, most of them actually have a new media in mind. They go, what should we be doing on Facebook? And I think the point that I'd make to you is, hey, step back from this, because all we now have is a broader range of media that we can take our message out there. But that's been happening for years. Why has it been so disruptive? What's different, if you will, around these particular channels, these particular media opportunities than what we've seen before? Because it's really hard, you know, blogs, Facebook, Twitter, and then there are individual communities which are being constructed around certain dialogue topics. We've got our old outbound emails, we've got things like that, but where do they all fit in the mix of things to do, and why are they different? Now, I can't give you the specifics on each of them because that would take a long time, but what we have found is that there is some commonality about these emerging technologies, about some of the more mature technologies, which fall under this banner of social media, that we need to anticipate as we take our messages out there. The first of those is immediacy. So we're using social media here. And at the end of the day, there's an opportunity, we're not exploiting that in this particular interaction, to take direct feedback. And we'll publish this and look for other feedback on websites. But when you have a look at things like Twitter, you know, the half-life of an idea on Twitter is about a nanosecond. Okay, it's gone. And people, if it's not responded to, lose their track. They want to do something else. And similar when published blogs, right? If those ideas and your input around the blog isn't responded to, well, then the next blog appears. And so there's a whole immediacy thing which people need to take on board as part of this. It's collaborative. No longer is it a form followed by another form and then you talk to me, and this is far more collaborative. It's unstructured, if you will, and it's personalised. So that what I see is what I want to see, not necessarily what the people who are selling to me always want me to see. And it's profile rich, of course. I mean, I don't know, but I'm sure many of you in days gone past meet someone either at a lead generation event or a show, or maybe it's having a beer in a bar, and you get a business card. And then after that, maybe 5 or 10 years ago, you take that business card and that would represent your information source. Now we've got technologies like LinkedIn. And what I find when I go to LinkedIn is I can see who that person works for, how long they've worked for, who their other contacts are. I can see a whole history of things. The richness of the profile that's now available through social media is unparalleled. And we can either choose to ignore it, or we can choose to take on board what the additional information that brings. And the final thing I want to point out is it's very segment specific. And let me give you an example there. So some financial planners were trying to make inroads into final year medical students at one of the universities. And they were using outbound email and found that they were getting no response. So they actually went out and surveyed these people. And final year medical students represent the high net worth individuals of the future, right? So it's a market that people do want to play in. But what they found is that these people were only expecting their emails about once every week or two. What they were doing is communicating as part of the community on Facebook. And so the idea of using outbound email didn't have nearly as much impact because that community was on a different space. And therein lies some of the key things that we need to anticipate here. But I put to you that these challenges and understanding the technology, well, we've done this sort of thing before. When email came out, we understood that. When SMS came out, we understood that. When, what really has changed here, and I think the issue lies not so much in purely the technology and the communication channel, but it lies as much in changes to the way people now buy. So with due reference to Hugh, who's joining you in the next session, I've taken some of his ideas and just mapped out a typical buyer's journey, from untroubled, unaware, right through to engaging with you as a supplier. And most of us get that, right? This is what we've been dealing with for years and years. Here's the interesting point, though, that maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when we had a look at that, we as sales organisations, marketing organisations, we controlled the way people bought from us. So we would publish an ad with an offer. We would publish information around a particular retailer that we would try and incent people to go to. We would control the information that was available. And so at the end of the day, when it comes down to it, you'd end up with a successful, profitable sale, but you directed the buyers through that journey. So now the issue becomes what's changed, and the real thing that's changed is that the buyers now are telling you when they want to interact with you. They're actually telling you when they want information. So they're now no longer dependent on your marketing communication strategy. They're no longer dependent on you saying, hey, deal with me via this particular channel, they're actually directing their self and arming themselves with information well before they meet with you. And I'm sure you've heard many examples of your reps on the road citing customers that arrive to talk with them. They know your best price. They know your competitor's price. They know what your value proposition is. They understand that, and all they want to buy is down here at a price point, and they've ignored what you want them to do, which is to follow decision criteria that enable you to give them a value-added proposition. Let me give you a personal example. I was out shopping with my daughter not so long ago, and we walked into the Optus shop, and the Optus rep there thought he knew something about the iPhone 4. He knows nothing. In fact, I almost had to invoke the mercy rule as my daughter took him apart in understanding so much more about the product and its features than this poor Optus rep. And you know why? Because her social networks talk about this stuff. And they talk about it independent of Apple. They talk about it independent of Optus. They form their own views. And so by the time she reached the person who was capable of giving a price point, she knew so much more than the poor rep. And that's what's changing. It's, yes, a little bit about changes in the available communication technology, but more fundamentally, it's changes around the way people want to buy from you. The availability of credible information. And by the way, the customer's expectation of what information is available on the web is so much greater. So web content, to a point, may be restricted to purely information around the product, but there's all these information consolidation sites and blog spots and people putting information. The web content is so much greater. And now people, they don't even need to come to you for that information. They can sit there and they can transact cradle to grave with you in many cases without dealing with you face-to-face. And without dealing with you in terms of your ability to influence the criteria that you want to set for them as to why they should buy from you. And so these established networks are emerging that talk about your product that you've got no control of. And you know what? People on these networks feel almost obligated to discuss the more negative parts of it rather than the positive part. But that's a whole human nature thing, and we won't go down that path. But the final point I do want to make on this is also the impact of these recommendation tools on people's personal networks. So people themselves, use that thumbs up. I'm sure everybody's seen that logo, and they can send to their people, their network, their community, their insights around the product. And so not only do we lose control over what our initial message is, we can lose control over who it ends up with and what some of that rider information is that sits over the top. So now we've got to ask the question, what does that mean to us? And the first thing I want to ask, and I put you on the spot now, is do you actually know what communication channels your customers are using? So if I was to ask you, as people buy in your marketplace, do they use the web? Would they prefer to deal with a face-to-face rep? Would they like, do they respect direct mail? Are they at seminars, at webinars? Are they using social media? What that sort of thing means. And, here's some work that just came out of Europe earlier this year. And basically what they said were for people who are making decisions of in a B2B mode of more than $10,000 or $15,000, what do they source their information from? And what you see here is that websites and the web searches are still the dominant source of information. And if you look down the bottom here, you'll see that the social media only account for about 10 or 15%. But there is a killer stinger here for you, and that is if you start breaking the demographic up to people who are making decisions who are under 30 years of age, their use of things like blogs goes from 12% to just under 20%. So it's absolutely community specific, it's absolutely market specific as to where do they find their information. So don't ignore your website, and remember the asset that you've created over time, don't throw that away. People are still using that, so don't suddenly redirect 100% of your budget to what you think they're trying to do in the social media space. So let me summarize just with a couple of key points here. The first one, from your impact on CRM, hey, the basic here is, why don't you just build a communications profile for your contact that has these other media in it? So Twitter, Facebook IDs, best time to call, so that we don't just have mobile phone number and email address, but find a repository for all of these profile information. And in fact, establish the governance around who can change that. I still find that if I said to someone on 24 hours, create a Christmas card list of your key executives in your top 50 accounts, you've battled. So make sure you know who's going to collect that information and who's got the ability to change that.